Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we're doing something a little different.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to pull back the curtain and take a look at media manipulation.
Oh.
All those blogs and articles we see online every day, we'll get ready to see them in a whole new light.
I'm intrigued. What are we diving into today?
Well, we'll be looking at Ryan Holiday's book, Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator.
Oh, very interesting. I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Holiday was a master at this whole media manipulation game, so he really knows how it all works.
Oh, that's perfect for this then.
Yeah, and we'll be bringing in some extra articles and reviews, too, just to add some more context.
Always good to get those different perspectives.
Exactly. So our goal today is to kind of uncover how easy it is for these blogs to be manipulated.
Right.
And also what motivates these bloggers to participate in this. And most importantly, how can you protect yourself from being misled?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just take things at face value online.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially now, everyone's just bombarded with information all the time.
Right. It's hard to know what's real and what's not.
Okay, so let's jump into this. Holiday calls this whole thing the blog hustle, where attention equals currency.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so basically, it doesn't even matter if it's true. It just matters that it's out there.
I see.
And Holiday, he would actually fabricate stories and then plant them on small blogs and watch them just explode.
He could get them on big media outlets too, though, right?
Oh, yeah. He wasn't just messing around with small blogs. He knew how to get these stories in front of millions of people.
Wow.
He even tells this crazy story about working on the movie I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell.
Oh, yeah. I remember that movie.
So to get people talking about it, he made up this whole story about the movie's billboards being vandalized.
Hey.
Yeah. And it actually worked. It went viral and sparked outrage and protest. They even banned advertising for the movie in some places.
That's kind of wild.
It is. It just goes to show how easily people can be manipulated with a good story.
Especially if it plays on their emotions.
Yeah. People love to take sides.
So did he have like a system for this?
Oh, yeah. He had this whole three-step process. So first, he'd plant the story on a small blog.
Okay.
And then once it gained traction, he'd leverage that to get it picked up by some bigger outlets. And from there, boom, you're in the national press.
Like a recipe.
Pretty much. And the crazy part is there was practically zero fact-checking.
Wow.
Yeah. He even helped his friend's charity go viral on Reddit.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, they're getting national attention.
All orchestrated.
All a carefully planned campaign to make it look like they were just super popular.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
That's the game. But what's interesting is that eventually, Holiday started to feel kind of bad about it.
Oh, so there's a conscience in there somewhere.
Well, he realized he was basically feeding the monster, and he started to question the ethics of what he was doing.
I see. So that's probably what led him to write the book then.
I think so. Almost like a confession, but also a warning to everyone.
A look behind the curtain?
Exactly. So we've talked about how he did it, but now let's get into why these blogs are so easily manipulated.
All right.
Holiday talks about this thing called the one-off problem.
Okay.
So blogs, they're constantly trying to survive. They need content to generate those page views and make money.
Yeah, it's all about that ad revenue.
Right. So they're not always too worried about whether something is true, as long as it gets them clicks.
Quantity over quality.
Exactly. Sensationalism over accuracy. And then you add in the fact that many bloggers are paid based on how many views they get.
It creates this whole ecosystem of just chasing the next viral hit.
And then that makes them super vulnerable to these manipulators who come in with these ready-made viral stories.
It's a pretty unhealthy relationship.
Oh, yeah. And on top of all that, there's all these conflicts of interest, too.
Oh, right. Like bloggers getting paid by the companies they're writing about.
Exactly. It all gets really blurry.
So how do you even know what to trust anymore?
Well, that's a great question, and one we'll be looking at as we go deeper. But it really highlights the need to be extra careful with what we believe online.
I agree with that.
Okay, so let's move on to another key concept here, the link economy.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
So basically, it's this whole network of blogs linking to each other's articles.
Kind of like they're all verifying each other.
Well, that's the idea. But
Mhm.
the problem is, if one blog makes a mistake,
It can spread quickly.
oh yeah, it's like a game of telephone. The story gets more and more distorted with each link.
And then it's really hard to figure out where the misinformation actually started.
Yeah, Holiday calls this iterative journalism, where bloggers are constantly updating their stories as more information comes out.
But they don't always acknowledge their role in spreading the initial potentially inaccurate story.
Nope. it just keeps getting repeated and amplified.
And before you know it, everyone's accepted it as fact.
Right. And it's not always an accident either. Like, remember that rumor about American Apparel closing stores?
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
That started from someone misinterpreting what a real estate agent said.
And then it spread like wildfire.
Oh, yeah. It was everywhere. Even ended up on AOL's daily finance blog.
Wow.
It just goes to show how quickly misinformation can take hold in this online world.
Absolutely.
Okay, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Get ready, because now we're going to dive into the dark side of this game, snark and degradation ceremonies.
Oh, this is where it gets juicy.
Oh, yeah. We're going to see how manipulators use humor and online communities to completely shape public perception and even destroy reputations.
Can't wait.
Stick with us. Things are about to get interesting.
I'm ready.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more on how to spot and avoid media manipulation online.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So before the break, we were talking about the dark side of all this online manipulation.
Yeah, all those tactics that exploit humor and public opinion.
Right, so Holiday calls this tactic snark, and it's this type of humor that's, it's hard to argue with, and it can be used to, like, attack or discredit someone without even really addressing what they're saying.
It's more about shutting down the conversation than engaging with it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's super effective at, like, shaping how the public sees something.
Right.
Holiday says snark is a key part of these, what he calls degradation ceremonies.
Oh, yeah. Where these blogs and online communities basically just gang up on someone and try to take them down.
And a lot of times it's based on hardly any evidence or even just straight up lies.
It doesn't seem to matter, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, outrage sells.
It gets the clicks, and that's what these blogs care about.
Holiday uses the example of Julian Assange.
Oh, yeah.
His image went from, like, nerdy sex god to megalomaniac almost overnight after those sexual assault accusations.
That's a pretty dramatic shift.
It is. It shows how easily public opinion can change and how quick these blogs are to jump on the bandwagon and ruin someone's reputation.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, like if someone like Assange could be taken down so easily, what hope do the rest of us have?
Right. It makes you think twice about what you post online.
For sure. So we've got the blog hustle, the link economy, and now snark and these degradation ceremonies.
It paints a pretty bleak picture.
But I'm sure there's more, right? Like,
Yeah.
what other tactics are these manipulators using?
Oh, there's a lot more. Holiday's pretty open about how he would basically just feed bloggers exactly what they wanted to hear.
Even if it wasn't true.
Even if it wasn't true. He talks about this one time when he needed to get some specific information out there during a lawsuit.
Okay.
So he made up this whole internal memo, made it look like it was leaked, and sent it to a bunch of blogs.
Oh, so he was basically creating fake news that helped his case.
Pretty much. And the blogs, they ate it up. They were so excited to have this exclusive scoop.
It's kind of genius in a messed up way.
It is. It just shows how eager these blogs are for anything that sounds exciting.
But what about the bloggers who are, like, all about the truth and integrity?
You'd think they'd see through that, right?
Well, it's not always so black and white. Holiday says that even the well-intentioned bloggers are under a lot of pressure to publish quickly.
So they don't always have time to do thorough fact-checking.
And especially if a story sounds really juicy.
Yeah, that's hard to resist.
Holiday says he would actually leave holes in his official statements on purpose, knowing that bloggers would fill them in with speculation.
He was basically inviting them to make stuff up.
Yeah, and they always did. They were more concerned with having a good story than with being accurate.
It's like he was using them.
Pretty much. So we've got these bloggers who are pressured, eager for a scoop, and not always the best at fact-checking.
Right.
But what about the sources they rely on? Are those always trustworthy?
Not necessarily. Holiday says that a lot of times the sources themselves have their own agendas.
So it's like a whole chain of manipulation.
Yeah, it's a web.
And Holiday was right there in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah. He was playing the game, too. He would pretend to be a concerned citizen or an anonymous tipster.
And just feed these bloggers whatever information he wanted them to spread, and they would just believe him.
Well, remember, they're always looking for easy content, and they don't always have the time or the resources to double-check everything.
Right, so it's a perfect storm for manipulation.
It really is.
But what about the sources we think of as being really reliable, like Wikipedia?
Good question.
Isn't that supposed to be like the ultimate trustworthy source?
Well, Holiday actually has some interesting things to say about that, too.
Really?
Yeah, he claims that even Wikipedia, with all its editors and fact-checking, can still be manipulated.
So anyone can just go in and change stuff.
It's not that easy, but it's definitely more vulnerable than people think. He gives this example of someone changing Russell Brand's mom's name on Wikipedia as a joke.
Oh, wow.
And the Los Angeles Times ended up using that wrong information in an article.
That's crazy. So if even Wikipedia can be messed with, what can we trust?
It's a good question, and it just shows that we can't blindly trust anything we read online.
Even if it seems like it's from a reliable source.
Yeah, we have to do our own research and consider different perspectives.
So it's not just about being skeptical of individual stories or sources. It's about understanding that the whole online system is vulnerable.
It is. The online information ecosystem is fragile, and we have to be aware of that.
Okay, so we've got the blog hustle, the link economy, snark, these degradation ceremonies, and now even seemingly reliable sources like Wikipedia can be manipulated.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is. It's like we're finally starting to see the scope of this problem.
But before we go any further, I think it's important to talk about what makes certain types of content so effective online.
Yeah, like is there a specific type of content that manipulators tend to use?
Well, Holiday says that content that triggers strong emotions, especially negative emotions like anger and outrage, spreads like wildfire.
So basically negativity sells.
Pretty much. He talks about this study from the Wharton School that looked at over 7,000 articles on the New York Times most emailed list. And guess what the biggest factor was in predicting whether something would spread online?
I'm guessing anger.
Anger, exactly.
Yeah.
So those clickbait headlines that are designed to make you mad,
they're not a coincidence.
oh no, they're a calculated strategy to get you to click share and make them money.
And the more we click and share, the more they produce.
It's a vicious cycle.
So what's the takeaway here?
Pay attention to your own emotions when you're online.
Like if you're clicking on something just because it makes you angry.
Then you might be playing right into their hands.
So being aware of our emotional responses is the first step.
It is. It's about breaking free from that manipulation.
So if negativity and outrage are what get people engaged online, how do these manipulators actually use that to their advantage?
Well, they often manipulate bloggers into spreading misinformation, even without those bloggers realizing it.
Okay, how do they do that?
Holiday talks about how he would carefully craft his statements and pitches in a way that would encourage bloggers to speculate and come to their own conclusions.
Even if those conclusions weren't really based on anything solid.
Exactly. He was basically using them as puppets to spread his own narrative.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. He would often put these rhetorical questions in his pitches, knowing that bloggers would turn them into those clickbait headlines.
Yeah, oh, I see.
Like he might say something like, could this be a cover-up? Or do you think they're hiding something?
And then the bloggers would run with it even if there was no evidence to support those claims.
Exactly. It's a very subtle way to shape the narrative without actually lying.
It's like planting seeds of doubt without making any direct accusations.
Yeah, it's all about manipulating the reader's perception.
Okay, so we've got these bloggers being tricked into spreading misinformation without even knowing it.
Right.
But what about those blogs that are all about being transparent and holding powerful people accountable?
You'd think they'd be immune to this, right?
Well, Holiday says that even those blogs can be blinded by their own biases.
What do you mean?
So these blogs, they're committed to exposing wrongdoing, which is great. But sometimes they get so focused on their own narrative that they start to ignore evidence that doesn't fit.
So they're not intentionally spreading lies, but they might be cherry-picking information.
Exactly. They're looking for things that confirm what they already believe.
And that can be just as dangerous as making stuff up.
So how do we protect ourselves from all of this?
It all comes back to that critical thinking.
Okay.
We have to question everything we read online, even if it comes from a source we usually trust.
So just because it's on a blog we like doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly. Look for evidence. Consider the source's motivations, and be careful of anything that makes you really emotional.
Especially anger.
Yeah, because those strong emotions can make us less critical.
So it's like a mental filter we have to develop.
It is. It's about being aware of the tactics being used and the motivations of the people spreading information.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's also empowering. Once you understand how it works, you can start to see through the manipulation.
So it's not about being cynical or giving up on the internet.
No, it's about being informed and making conscious choices.
Okay, so we've talked about the tactics, the vulnerabilities, and the importance of critical thinking.
Right.
But I want to bring it back to the reader. Like, what does all this mean for me personally?
Well, it means you have more power than you think.
Okay.
You have the power to choose what you consume, what you share, and what you believe.
That's about taking back control.
Exactly. You're not just a passive recipient of information. You can shape the online world.
By being more conscious of our choices and more skeptical.
Exactly. It's about being a more savvy and informed online consumer.
This has been really eye-opening.
It has.
I feel like I see the internet in a whole new way now. Thanks for taking us through this.
My pleasure.
All right, so before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to talk about this concept of unreality that Holiday brings up
Okay.
and how it affects how we see the world.
That's a really important point. It gets to the heart of why this manipulation is so dangerous.
So it's about how this constant stream of sensationalized content creates a distorted view of reality.
Exactly. It's like we're living in a world where everything is exaggerated and overblown.
Yeah, and the danger is that it can make us distrust legitimate information and become cynical about everything.
Because if everything's a lie, why even bother paying attention?
Right, and that's exactly what these manipulators want.
They want to create a world where no one trusts anything except their own narrative.
So it's not just about spreading lies. It's about undermining our faith in truth altogether.
It's about making us doubt everything.
So how do we fight back against this? How do we escape this unreality and learn to see things clearly again?
That's the big question, and one we'll be exploring more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But the key is recognizing the tactics, understanding the motivations, and developing our own critical thinking skills.
So we can't just blindly accept what we see online.
No, we have to be active participants in the information ecosystem.
Okay, I'm ready to dive deeper. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore some strategies for navigating this complex and often manipulative online landscape. Welcome back to the deep dive. Phew. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I mean, everywhere you look online, someone's trying to, trick you or something. But before we all just give up and unplug, what can we actually do to protect ourselves?
Well, the good news is we're already ahead of the game. Just by knowing these tactics, we're more likely to spot them.
So we don't have to avoid the internet completely. It's more about just being, I guess, smarter about how we use it.
Exactly. It's like building up a healthy sense of skepticism, like a filter to help you sort through all the noise and the BS.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Where do we even start?
Well, remember the one-off problem we talked about earlier? Those blogs are racing to get content out there.
Right, they need all those clicks. So are you saying we should be suspicious of those super attention-grabbing headlines or those simple explanations that seem a little too perfect?
It's not that those things are always bad, but it's a good reminder to pause for a second and think, who wrote this? Why did they write it? And is there any real proof to back up what they're saying?
So take a breath before you click, share, or get all fired up about something.
Exactly. And don't just focus on what they're saying, but how they're saying it. Holiday was a master at tweaking headlines to make a story sound way more exciting, even if it wasn't really that big of a deal.
Ah, so those clickbait headlines are designed to, push our buttons on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about getting you to click. Once you realize that's happening, you'll start to see it everywhere.
Okay, so watch out for the clickbait and remember that blogs are under a lot of pressure. What else? What other tricks should we be looking out for?
Well, remember the link economy, how all those blogs link to each other. The problem is that one little mistake can spread like crazy.
Right, like a chain reaction of bad information. One made-up story gets picked up by everyone else, and then suddenly it seems like everyone's saying the same thing.
Exactly. And even if the original story gets corrected, those corrections rarely get the same attention. It's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube.
So even if a blog admits they were wrong, the damage is kind of already done.
Yeah, pretty much. The first story, even if it's bogus, tends to stick in people's minds.
So how do we, as readers, how do we avoid getting caught up in all that?
It goes back to critical thinking. Don't just believe something because it's on a bunch of different blogs.
So even if a story is on, 5 different websites, we still need to check it out ourselves.
Yep. Try to find the original source of the information. Ask yourself if that source is believable. Do they have a reason to be biased? And be careful with anything that's trying to make you really angry or upset.
Right, because when we're emotional, we don't think as clearly.
Exactly. Those manipulators are counting on that. They want to bypass your logic and go straight for your gut reaction.
So we've got to be more aware of how we're feeling when we're online. Why am I so mad about this? Is it really that big of a deal, or am I just being played?
Exactly. It's not about ignoring your feelings. It's about understanding how those feelings can be used against you.
It's like we need a healthy dose of skepticism, not just about what we're reading, but about how we're reacting to it.
You got it. That skepticism, along with critical thinking, is your best weapon against being manipulated.
So it's bigger than just checking if one story is true or false. It's about understanding how this whole online system works, with all the pressure on blogs, the money involved, how those links can be used to spread bad info.
You're getting it. It's about seeing the internet, the whole thing, as this complicated system with all its strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, it's like looking at the online world through a new set of glasses. It's kind of shocking at first.
But that's a good thing. Once you understand the rules, you can play the game smarter. You can choose how you interact online in a way that is, well, more thoughtful, more critical, and ultimately puts you back in control.
Okay, so we've covered the tactics, the vulnerabilities, and why critical thinking is so important. But before we wrap up this whole deep dive, let's bring it back to the reader. Like, what does all this actually mean for me?
It means you have a lot more power than you might think. You get to choose what you read, what you share, and what you ultimately believe.
So it's not about giving up on the internet. It's about, like, taking back our power as information consumers.
Exactly. You're not just sitting there absorbing whatever comes your way. You actually help shape what the online world looks like.
It's about making more conscious choices about what we read and share, recognizing those manipulative tactics, and being willing to say, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right here.
Exactly. It's about being a smarter, more informed, and ultimately more empowered user of online information.
This has been amazing. I feel like I have a completely different understanding of how all this works. Thanks for walking us through it.
It's been my pleasure. Just remember, knowledge is power. Arm yourself with a healthy dose of skepticism, be willing to think critically, and you can navigate the online world with confidence. You don't have to be a victim of manipulation.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you've learned a thing or two about how to spot and avoid those sneaky tactics online.
Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay informed.